After 15 years of being told I was too difficult for family gatherings, my daughter and son-in-law had the audacity to show up at my penthouse begging for money. They had no idea I'd been recording every cruel word they'd said about me over the years. The look on their faces when my lawyer played back their own voices in court was worth every lonely holiday I'd endured. Follow my story until the end and comment what city you're watching from so I can see how far this reaches. At 70, I thought I understood what family loyalty meant. My name is Magdalena Hawthorne, and for 4 decades I had poured my heart, soul, and every waking moment into building Hawthorne Estates, a luxury real estate empire that spanned from the vineyards of Napa Valley to the coastal properties of Big Sur. My corner penthouse on the 42nd floor of the Millennium Tower in downtown San Francisco had been my sanctuary and my reward, floor-to-ceiling windows offering a breathtaking view of the Golden Gate Bridge, Alcatraz Island gleaming in the distance, and the rolling fog that painted the bay in shades of silver and gold each morning. The penthouse wasn't just a home, it was a testament to what a woman could build when she refused to accept limitations. Every marble surface, every piece of custom furniture, every carefully curated art piece told the story of someone who had started with nothing and created something magnificent. The Baccarat crystal chandelier in the foyer had been my gift to myself when Hawthorne Estates hit its first $100 million year. The Italian leather seating arrangement facing the windows was where I'd conducted some of my most important negotiations, the city sprawling below us as I closed deals that would shape San Francisco's skyline for decades. I hadn't inherited this life, I had built it, brick by brick, contract by contract, through 18-hour days and sleepless nights when others were home with their families. While other women my age had been attending PTA meetings and soccer games, I had been transforming abandoned warehouses into luxury condominiums, turning neglected neighborhoods into sought-after addresses, and creating homes for thousands of families across Northern California. The irony that haunted my quiet evenings was profound. I had spent my life creating beautiful homes for strangers, while struggling to maintain a place in my own family's heart. My daughter Cordelia had always been my greatest source of pride and my deepest source of heartache. Even as a child, she had possessed an ethereal beauty and a sharp intelligence that reminded me of myself at her age. But where I had channeled my intensity into building something lasting, Cordelia had directed hers toward perfection. Perfect grades, perfect appearance, perfect social connections, and eventually what she considered the perfect marriage. I had raised Cordelia largely alone after her father, my college sweetheart Marcus, died in a car accident when she was only 12. Marcus had been the gentle balance to my ambitious drive, the one who reminded me to slow down and notice the small moments. His death had left both Cordelia and me adrift, each of us grieving in our own way, while trying to maintain some semblance of normal family life. Perhaps that's where I made my first mistake. Drowning in grief and overwhelmed by single parenthood, I had thrown myself even deeper into my work. Hawthorne Estates became not just my career, but my escape, my way of avoiding the empty spaces in our house where Marcus's laughter used to echo. I told myself I was securing Cordelia's future, building something that would give her every opportunity I'd never had. But Cordelia saw only a mother who was physically present but emotionally unavailable, who could negotiate million-dollar deals but struggled to help with algebra homework without checking her phone. By the time I realized my mistake, Cordelia was already 17 and had learned to navigate life without expecting much emotional support from me. She was polite, accomplished, and increasingly distant. The perfect daughter on paper, but someone who felt more like a sophisticated roommate than my child. When Cordelia announced her engagement to Nathaniel Pemberton III at 26, I was genuinely thrilled. Nathaniel came from one of San Francisco's oldest families. His great-grandfather had made a fortune in shipping and railroads in the 1800s, and the Pemberton name was synonymous with philanthropy, culture, and old money elegance. More importantly, he seemed to worship Cordelia in a way that reminded me of how Marcus had looked at me in our early years. Nathaniel was everything I had hoped for in a son-in-law. Harvard educated, articulate, professionally successful as a portfolio manager for high net worth clients, and genuinely kind to me during our initial interactions. He asked thoughtful questions about my business, expressed admiration for what I had built, and seemed to understand the demands and rewards of building wealth from nothing. Their wedding was a masterpiece of San Francisco society. 300 guests at the St. Francis Hotel with a reception that showcased the best of everything the city had to offer. I had insisted on paying for the entire celebration, partly because I could afford it, and partly because I wanted to give Cordelia the fairy tale wedding she had dreamed about since childhood. The event made the society pages of the Chronicle, with photographs of the bride looking radiant in her custom Vera Wang gown and the groom beaming beside her as they danced beneath chandeliers that cast rainbow light across the ballroom.
In 2015, American archaeologist Dr. Robert Chen had purchased the property. 6 months later, his family received a letter stating he had decided to join a research expedition in remote Peru and would be incommunicado for several years. No one had heard from him since. In 2018, wealthy collector Isabella Rodriguez bought the temple. 3 months later, she supposedly moved to Spain to care for a sick relative. Her business associates said the move was completely out of character, but her lawyer confirmed the authenticity of her correspondence. In 2021, British researcher James Morrison acquired the property. He allegedly decided to relocate to New Zealand and pursue sustainable farming. His colleagues at Cambridge found this career change baffling, but had received official documentation of his resignation. Elena's academic training kicked in. 3 people, 3 disappearances, 3 convenient explanations that removed them from the public eye permanently. Someone was eliminating anyone who got too close to whatever was hidden in that temple. Her phone rang, jolting her from her research. A no number. Dr. Vasquez, a voice said in accented English, "I understand you've made an interesting acquisition." "Who is this?" "Someone who wants to help you avoid your predecessor's fate. There's a cafe in Antigua's Central Square called El Quetzal. Meet me there tomorrow at noon. Come alone." "Why should I trust you?" "Because I'm the only person who can tell you what really happened to Dr. Chen, Ms. Rodriguez, and Mr. Morrison. And more importantly, I'm the only one who can help ensure you don't join them." The line went dead. Elena spent the rest of the night researching everything she could about the temple's location. What she discovered made her blood run cold. The site wasn't just any colonial temple. It was built directly over Yaxmuul, one of the most sacred sites in ancient Mayan civilization. According to historical records, Yaxmuul had been the burial place of Kinich Yasau Chankawil, one of the most powerful rulers in Mayan history. Legend said he was buried with treasures that represented the accumulated wealth of an entire civilization: gold, jade, obsidian, and codices that contain advanced mathematical and astronomical knowledge. Spanish conquistadors had searched for the tomb for decades, but never found it. They eventually built the colonial temple over the site, perhaps to claim the location for Christianity, or perhaps to hide their continued secret excavations. If Carlos was right, someone had found Kinach Yasau's tomb and was willing to commit murder to protect it. Elena arrived at El Quetzal Café 15 minutes early, choosing a table with clear sightlines to all entrances. The person who approached her was not what she expected. Dr. Maria Santos was elegant and professional, a woman in her 50s with the confident bearing of someone accustomed to authority. She wore expensive jewelry that Elena's trained eye recognized as authentic pre-Columbian pieces worth hundreds of thousands of dollars. "Dr. Vasquez, thank you for coming. I'm the former director of archaeological preservation for the Ministry of Culture." "Former?" "I was forced to resign when I discovered what was happening at your temple." Dr. Santos ordered coffee with steady hands, but Elena noticed tension around her eyes. "What I'm about to tell you will sound incredible, but I have documentation to prove every word." She pulled out a tablet and showed Elena photographs that made her gasp. The images showed an intact Mayan burial chamber of unprecedented richness, walls covered in hieroglyphic murals, ceremonial objects made of gold and precious stones, and shelves lined with codices that appeared to be in perfect condition. This is the tomb of Kinich Yasau Chankawil, Dr. Santos explained. It was discovered in 1987 by a joint expedition between our government and certain private interests. The find was so significant that a decision was made to keep it secret while a proper excavation was conducted. Why the secrecy? Because the tomb contains more than treasure, Dr. Vasquez. The codices include astronomical calculations that are more advanced than anything we previously knew about Mayan science, mathematical formulas that could revolutionize our understanding of pre-Columbian achievement, cultural artifacts that would fundamentally change how the world views indigenous American civilizations. Elena stared at the images. This would be the archaeological discovery of the century. Exactly. Which is why certain powerful people decided it should never be revealed. Dr. Santos swiped to another image, a document bearing official seals. This is a secret agreement signed in 1988. The tomb's contents were to be gradually and quietly sold to private collectors, with profits split between corrupt government officials and an international network of artifact smugglers. That's cultural genocide. Indeed, they've been systematically looting one of the most important archaeological sites in the Americas for 35 years. The temple above was maintained as a decoy, sold periodically to maintain the illusion that the site was abandoned. Elena felt sick, and anyone who gets too close disappears. The 3 previous owners weren't killed, Dr. Vasquez. They were relocated, bribed or threatened into new identities far from Guatemala, but their cooperation was encouraged by demonstrations of what would happen if they refused. What kind of demonstrations? Dr. Santos's expression darkened. Dr. Chen's research assistant was found dead in what appeared to be a climbing accident. Ms. Rodriguez's business partner died in a car crash. Mr. Morrison's graduate student overdosed on drugs he had never been known to use. The message was clear. Cooperate and disappear quietly, or refuse and watch people you care about die. Why are you telling me this?
Because I've spent 3 years gathering evidence to expose this conspiracy, but I needed someone with legitimate legal claim to the property to help me access the site officially. Dr. Santos leaned forward. You bought that temple legally, Dr. Vasquez. You have rights that even they can't simply make disappear. What are you proposing? We document everything in the tomb, expose the conspiracy, and ensure these artifacts return to the Guatemalan people where they belong. Elena thought about her academic training, her commitment to preserving indigenous cultures, and her responsibility to the truth. But she also thought about Dr. Chen, Ms. Rodriguez Santos, Mr. Morrison, and their missing lives. And if we're caught, then we join a very exclusive list of people who chose principles over personal safety. Before Elena could respond, Dr. Santos's phone buzzed. She looked at the message and her face went white. We need to leave, now. They know about our meeting. As they stood to go, Elena noticed 3 men in business suits entering the cafe. They moved with purpose, scanning the room until their eyes locked onto Elena and Dr. Santos. The conspiracy had found them. Elena realized she was no longer just a graduate student who had made an interesting purchase. She was now a target of people who'd been committing cultural crimes for decades and had already proven they would kill to protect their secret. The 50-cent temple had just made her an enemy of some of the most dangerous people in the international art world. The distinguished man in the expensive suit extended his hand with practiced charm, but Serafina noticed that his 3 companions had positioned themselves to block all exits from the cafe. Dr. Blackwood, Dr. Restrepo, please don't be alarmed. I'm Vincent Castellanos, Director of Cultural Asset Management for the Meridian Foundation. I believe we have much to discuss regarding your recent archaeological interests. Dr. Restrepo's jaw tightened. The Meridian Foundation is a front organization, Dr. Blackwood. They're the ones who've been systematically looting the Reino della Luna site for 3 decades. Such harsh words, Esperanza, Castellanos replied smoothly. We prefer to think of ourselves as cultural preservationists, ensuring that irreplaceable artifacts receive proper care and appreciation from discerning collectors worldwide. You mean selling stolen heritage to private buyers who hide it in vaults where scholars can never study it, Serafina said, her academic outrage overcoming her fear. Castellanos' smile remained fixed, but his eyes grew colder. Dr. Blackwood, you've purchased property that contains materials of extraordinary cultural and monetary value, materials that require specialized handling to ensure their preservation and appropriate distribution. Distribution to whom? Individuals and institutions with the resources and commitment necessary to protect such treasures for future generations. He gestured to one of his companions who produced a leather portfolio. The Meridian Foundation is prepared to offer you $12 million for immediate transfer of your property rights, plus relocation assistance to any country of your choosing. Serafina's breath caught. $12 million would solve every financial problem she ever had, fund any research project she could imagine, and set her up for life. But the offer also confirmed everything Dr. Restrepo had told her about the site's incredible value and the conspiracy surrounding it. And if I refuse? Then you'll follow the same path as Dr. Chen, Ms. Rodriguez-Santos, Professor Mackenzie, and Dr. Volkov. Comfortable relocation to a location where you can pursue new interests far from Central America. They're not living comfortably somewhere else, Dr. Restrepo interjected. Show her the photographs, Vincent. Castellanos' composure cracked slightly. I don't know what you mean. The photographs I took at the Meridian Foundation's private storage facility in Panama City, the ones showing personal effects from all 4 previous temple owners, items they would never have left voluntarily. They're dead, aren't they? The previous owners made choices that ultimately proved incompatible with their continued well-being, but you have the opportunity to be smarter than they were. That's when Itzel Colt stepped out from behind the cafe's coffee bar, where he had apparently been working as a server. In his hands was a smartphone that had clearly been recording the entire conversation. And I have been documenting everything you have said, Mr. Castellanos, Itzel announced calmly, including your admission of murder. Castellanos spun around, his professional demeanor evaporating. How did you? My family has been protecting the secrets of Templo de la Luna Sagrada for 23 generations. Did you think we would not be watching when another person bought our sacred site? Did you think we would not be prepared for your arrival? One of Castellanos' companions reached inside his jacket, but froze when he realized other cafe patrons were now standing and watching with obvious hostility. What had appeared to be random customers were clearly Itzel's allies, local people who had been positioned throughout the establishment. Dr. Blackwood, Dr. Restrepo, Itzel said urgently. There's a service entrance through the kitchen. My truck is parked in the alley behind this building. We need to leave immediately.
I appreciate both your offers, Isabella said finally, but I think I need to see exactly what I've purchased before I make any decisions about selling it. The silence that followed her words was more profound than anything she'd experienced in the auction room. "Ms. Thorne," Director Volkov said quietly, "that would be extremely inadvisable." "For whom?" "For everyone involved, including yourself." But Isabella was already walking toward her rental car. Behind her, she could hear urgent conversations in multiple languages and the sound of car doors slamming. Whatever secret Grimhold Fortress contained, half of Eastern Europe's historical establishment seemed terrified of it being discovered, which meant it was exactly the kind of mystery that had driven Isabella's entire career. As she drove away from Vallon Hall toward the remote Drakmoor Valley, Isabella couldn't shake the feeling that she'd just triggered events that had been waiting decades to unfold. Everyone involved, the government officials, the academics, the collectors, the mysterious baron, seemed to know exactly what those events would be. Everyone except her. But that was about to change. The fortress waited in the mists of the Drakmoor Valley, its secrets locked behind walls that had stood for nearly a millennium, secrets that someone had gone to extraordinary lengths to keep buried, secrets that medieval warriors had died protecting. Isabella Thorne was about to discover what Casimir the Iron and his men had sealed away 6 centuries ago, and why the modern world was still afraid to let it see daylight. The 2-hour drive through increasingly remote mountain roads gave her plenty of time to think about the strange reactions she'd witnessed. By the time she reached the turnoff for Grimhold Fortress, marked only by a weathered stone marker partially hidden by overgrown vegetation, Isabella had reached several disturbing conclusions. First, everyone at that auction knew something about the fortress that wasn't included in any public records. Second, whatever they knew was serious enough to keep seasoned collectors and academics from bidding on a $1-million property. Third, the involvement of cultural security suggested government-level suppression of information. And fourth, she was about to find out why. The road to Grimhold Fortress wound through increasingly desolate mountain terrain, past abandoned villages and forests that seemed untouched by modern civilization. As Isabella climbed higher into the Drakmoor Valley, her cell phone signal disappeared entirely, cutting her off from the outside world. The fortress appeared suddenly as she rounded a sharp curve, a massive stone structure perched on a cliff edge like a predatory bird. Even in daylight, Grimhold looked ominous, its black stone walls seeming to absorb light rather than reflect it. The main keep towered nearly 200 feet above the valley floor, while massive defensive walls stretched across the entire ridge. Isabella parked at the outer gate and approached on foot. The heavy iron gate stood slightly ajar, secured only by a modern padlock that looked almost comical against the medieval ironwork. The keys from the auction worked perfectly, and the gate swung open with a groan that echoed across the empty valley. Inside the outer courtyard, Isabella felt the weight of nearly a millennium of history pressing down on her. The cobblestones were cracked and overgrown with moss, but the defensive architecture was still magnificent. Arrow slits lined the walls at strategic intervals, and the massive gatehouse showed evidence of sophisticated medieval engineering. But it was the silence that struck her most forcefully. No birds sang in the fortress grounds, no insects buzzed in the overgrown gardens. Even the wind seemed muted, as if the very air was reluctant to disturb this place. The main keep's door was different from the outer gates. Thick oak, reinforced with iron bands, secured by 3 separate locks that looked far more recent than medieval. Isabella tried every key on the ring, but none fit. She was examining the locks more closely when she heard the sound of an approaching vehicle echoing up from the valley road. Dr. Katerina Blackthorne emerged from a battered Land Rover, carrying a large canvas bag and moving with the purposeful stride of someone who'd been planning this moment for years. "I was hoping you'd come," Isabella called out. "I couldn't let you face this alone, especially not when I'm probably the only person alive who knows the real history of this place." "The real history?" Dr. Blackthorne reached the courtyard and set down her bag. She pulled out a thick folder of photocopied documents and spread them on a flat section of the courtyard wall. Casimir the Iron wasn't just a warrior lord. He was also a scholar, obsessed with preserving knowledge. When the Mongol invasions began sweeping across Eastern Europe in the 1380s, he realized that centuries of accumulated wisdom, libraries, scientific texts, religious manuscripts, would be destroyed. Isabella examined the documents. They appeared to be copies of medieval chronicles written in Latin, with modern translations attached. So he gathered everything of value from across the region and brought it here? More than that. Casimir had discovered something during the construction of this fortress, something that made him believe this location was special. Dr. Blackthorne pointed to a detailed architectural drawing that showed the fortress's underground levels. Unlike typical castle foundations, Grimhold had been built around a massive natural cave system that extended deep into the mountain. The workers who excavated the foundation found chambers that had been sealed for thousands of years, chambers that contained artifacts predating recorded history of this region by millennia. Isabella felt a chill that had nothing to do with the mountain air. What kind of artifacts? Written records in languages that shouldn't have existed in medieval Europe, scientific instruments that demonstrated knowledge of astronomy and mathematics centuries ahead of their time, and other things that the church immediately declared heretical. The sound of multiple vehicles approaching interrupted their conversation. Looking down into the valley, Isabella could see a convoy of black SUVs winding up the mountain road at high speed. "They found us faster than I expected," Dr. Blackthorne muttered. "Who?" But the answer became clear as the vehicles reached the fortress gates. Director Magda Volkov emerged from the lead SUV, accompanied by 6 men in tactical gear. Baron von Malthorn stepped out of the second vehicle, his expensive suit now accompanied by a military-style vest. The third SUV disgorged the most surprising passengers of all, 3 elderly individuals who moved with the careful dignity of advanced age, but the sharp awareness of people accustomed to authority. "The Council," Dr. Blackthorne whispered. "What council?" "The descendants of the families who sealed this fortress in 1387. They've been protecting its secrets for over 6 centuries. The approaching group moved with military precision, but Isabella noticed something important. They weren't treating this as a hostile operation. Their weapons weren't drawn, and their body language suggested caution rather than aggression. Director Volkov stopped about 20 feet from Isabella and Dr. Blackthorne. "Ms. Thorne, Dr. Blackthorne, you forced us into a very difficult situation." "We haven't forced anything," Isabella replied. "I bought this property legally." "Yes," said one of the elderly individuals, a woman with silver hair and aristocratic bearing. "And by doing so, you've triggered protocols that have been in place for over 600 years. She introduced herself as Countess Elena Drakmoor, and Isabella realized she was looking at a direct descendant of the medieval nobility who had once ruled this region. "I am Baron von Malthorn, as you know. But I didn't mention that my family has been the hereditary guardians of this fortress since 1387. The third elderly individual stepped forward. "Professor Dmitry Kozlov, University of Moscow. My ancestors were among the scholars who helped Casimir seal the lower chambers." Isabella felt the weight of centuries pressing down on her. These weren't just government officials and academics. These were the inheritors of a secret that had been passed down through nearly 30 generations. What exactly did Casimir seal down there? The 3 elderly guardians exchanged glances, and Isabella could see a silent debate playing out. Finally, Countess Drakmoor spoke. "Knowledge that the medieval world wasn't ready to understand. Knowledge that the modern world still isn't ready to understand." Dr. Blackthorne stepped forward. "Tell her about the manuscript of Aethon." The reaction was immediate and dramatic. Baron von Malthorn went pale, Director Volkov's hand moved towards her weapon, and Professor Kozlov actually staggered backward. "How do you know that name?" Countess Drakmoor asked quietly. "Because I've spent 15 years researching suppressed historical documents, and I know that Casimir didn't just preserve medieval knowledge. He found something that predated medieval civilization by thousands of years. The silence stretched so long that I could hear my own heartbeat. Finally, Professor Kozlov spoke. The manuscript of Aethon contains mathematical and astronomical knowledge that wouldn't be discovered by mainstream science for another 600 years. Star charts showing the exact positions of celestial bodies with accuracy that shouldn't have been possible without modern telescopes. Geometric principles that anticipated advanced engineering by centuries. And that's just what we understood. There are sections written in symbols that no linguist has ever been able to decipher. Diagrams of devices that appear to be technological in nature, but using principles we still don't comprehend. Isabella realized the magnitude of what they were discussing. You're talking about evidence of advanced prehistoric civilization. We're talking about evidence that could fundamentally alter humanity's understanding of its own development. Knowledge that could destabilize every major religion, rewrite every history textbook, and challenge the fundamental assumptions of modern archaeology.
This is impossible, Director Volkov said. No medieval document could contain knowledge of this scope. Because it isn't medieval, Countess Drakmoor replied. Our families have known for centuries that Casimir didn't create this knowledge. He found it here when the fortress was built. The caves contained evidence of a civilization that existed in this region thousands of years before recorded history. The sound of boots on the stone steps interrupted their exploration. The military forces had found the entrance and were descending into the chamber. But as the soldiers emerged into the vast space, something unexpected happened. Instead of the aggressive posture Isabella had expected, they stopped and stared in obvious awe at the chamber's contents. The commanding officer, a colonel with graying temples, approached the group slowly. Colonel Petrov, Valdorian Special Forces, he introduced himself. I've been ordered to secure this site and preserve whatever has been discovered here. Preserve it? Isabella asked. Not destroy it or classify it? Which is exactly why it needs to be handled through proper academic channels, Colonel Petrov replied. The President has already contacted UNESCO and several major universities. This site is going to be designated as a World Heritage location, with international oversight for its study and preservation. Isabella felt a wave of relief wash over her. Instead of the cover-up and suppression she'd feared, the discovery was going to be handled openly and scientifically. But Countess Drakmoor looked troubled. Colonel, are you certain your government is prepared for the implications of this knowledge? Some of these texts challenge fundamental assumptions about human development and technological advancement. Colonel Petrov nodded seriously. Countess, the world has changed significantly since your ancestors first sealed these chambers. Modern science is far more equipped to handle discoveries that challenge established theories, and the global academic community has protocols for managing paradigm-shifting discoveries. Over the following hours, as more researchers and government officials arrived at the fortress, Isabella watched the most significant archaeological discovery in human history begin to unfold in a systematic, professional manner. The manuscript of Aethon had carefully been photographed and documented by teams of linguists, historians, and archaeologists. The crystalline devices were analyzed by physicists and material scientists. Every symbol on the chamber walls was recorded and studied by experts in ancient languages. And Isabella found herself appointed as the site's official administrator, responsible for overseeing the preservation and management of Grimhold Fortress as it transformed from a forgotten ruin into one of the most important archaeological sites in the world. 6 months later, Isabella stood in the great hall of Grimhold Fortress, now bustling with researchers from dozens of countries. The fortress had been transformed into a state-of-the-art research facility, with the medieval structure carefully preserved while being equipped with modern amenities for the international team of scholars studying the underground chambers.
The manuscript of Athon had already yielded discoveries that were revolutionizing multiple fields of study. Astronomers had confirmed that its star charts contained accurate information about celestial phenomena that wouldn't be observed until the modern era. Engineers were studying architectural principles that could improve modern construction techniques. Linguists had identified connections between ancient symbol systems that suggested far more sophisticated prehistoric communication networks than previously imagined. But perhaps most importantly, the discovery had been handled exactly as it should have been, through open scientific inquiry rather than suppression or exploitation. Dr. Blackthorne approached Isabella as she reviewed the day's research reports. "Any regrets about that $1 bid?" she asked with a smile. Isabella looked around the bustling fortress, now home to some of the world's leading researchers working on humanity's most significant historical discovery. "Not a single one," she replied. "Though I have to admit, I never imagined a medieval fortress would come with quite this much complexity." Dr. Blackthorne laughed. "The best historical discoveries usually do. But this one is particularly special because it's changing how we understand our own past." Through the great hall's windows, Isabella could see the Drakmoor Valley spread out below, no longer desolate, but dotted with research facilities, housing for international scholars, and infrastructure to support the ongoing excavation and study of the site. The $1 fortress had become the foundation for a new understanding of human history. More importantly, it had shown Isabella that sometimes the most significant discoveries aren't about what you find, but about having the courage to look for truth even when others prefer to keep it buried. She was no longer just Isabella Thorne, historical preservationist. She was Isabella Thorne, the woman who had opened the door to humanity's hidden past and helped ensure that knowledge belonged to the entire world rather than being locked away by those too afraid to let it see daylight. And that transformation was worth far more than any amount of money could ever be. The medieval warriors who had protected these secrets for 6 centuries could finally rest. Their knowledge was safe, preserved not by secrecy and guardianship, but by open inquiry and scientific study. The truth, as it turned out, was worth waiting for.